Okay, this is actually my second attempt because my first Lofi attempt had some issues. I'm gonna be real. The Lo-fi I chose wasn't specifically geared towards sleep, and my voice and reading wasn't so good. I need to stay at a slower pace so that I can pronounce words better, but also so we're not rushing. There's no need to rush. It's sleepy time. Well, it's as sleepy as we can get. So here, thanks to our Libby app, we can have a couple of articles from this magazine, Ancient History. And as you can see, there's different sections here. I'm thinking we'll go over some of the beginning things, like, what looks interesting today? This jug looks kind of interesting. Why don't we start with that? So, it appears to be some kind of archaeology, and so not too much, in depth, but it is a nice looking jug. So, let's go. Evidence of honey in bronze jars found in a Paestum shrine. The residue found in bronze jars excavated in a 6th century BC Greek shrine in Paestum is honey in a honeycomb, according to new research from the University of Oxford. While collaborating on the Last Supper in Pompeii exhibition in 2019, Parco Archeologico di Pompeii permitted researchers at Oxford's Ashmolean Museum to reanalyze a Greek bronze hydra's organic contents using modern instruments at the university's Department of Chemistry. An array of analytical techniques, including mass spectrometry for proteins and small molecule compositional analysis, determined the makeup of the ancient orange-brown residue. This integrated approach identified sugars, organic acids, and proteins that would have remained undetected using a single method. By applying several mass spectrometry and spectroscopic approaches, we were able to distinguish between contaminants, degradation products, and original biomarkers, said Professor James McCullough, director of Oxford's Mass Spectrometry Research Facility, who co-led the project. The turning point in the project came with the identification of major royal jelly proteins, all specific to honeybee secretions, said Elisabette Perez of Oxford's Department of Chemistry. Additional insights were derived by comparing the results obtained for the ancient residue with the outcomes of analyses of modern honeycomb samples and experimental simulations of degraded honeycomb. The result has demonstrated that the ancient residue had a near identical chemical fingerprint to modern beeswax and similar modern honey. The open access study, a symbol of immortality, evidence of honey in bronze jars found in a Paestum shrine dating to 530 to 510 BCE, is published in the Journal of American Chemical Society, Volume 147, Issue 33. So, that was interesting. I don't know why it's important that they had honey, because I feel like honey's been around a while, but it was nice that I picked one that was chemistry based, because I know some of the words, even if I can't say them so well. Ooh, this could be interesting. Let's go with another fossil one before we go more in depth into the special articles. So it looks like this fossil here. Fossil worn as an ornament in Roman Spain. A fossil once used by the Romans as an amulet has been recovered by archaeologists working in northwestern Spain. The fossil, a trilobite, has a reddish hue caused by iron oxide mineralization. Microscopic analysis revealed 7 human-made facets of the fossil surface, suggesting it had been flattened for mounting a metal. The researchers believe it was deliberately modified and worn as a pendant or bracelet, possibly for its perceived supernatural powers. Supernatural reference. The specimen is the first confirmed trilobite fossil from Roman times, one of the only 3 known examples worldwide to have been deliberately collected and used by humans, and the 11th ever found in an archaeological context. The object was excavated alongside a bronze coin of Emperor Augustus. The find recalls a historical account of Augustus's fascination with fossils. As Suetonius writes, at Capri, he displayed the monstrous bones of huge sea monsters and wild beasts, called the bones of giants, and the weapons of heroes. It is described in the paper Significance of Fossils in Roman Times, the first trilobite find in an early empire context, in Archaeological and Anthropological Sciences, 17. We could go over some of the other ones, but, you know, I did attempt to read them before, and I wanted to try something new. I did read this centaur thing, but you know what? I found it interesting, so I don't mind reading it again. It could be nice. Let's look a little more of the pictures though, because here, yeah, that's a tiger. A Roman mosaic depicting centaurs battling wild animals. Throughout the Greco-Roman world, centaurs were representations of the savagery humans were capable of. Let's learn a little bit more about that, shall we? Wildness and the Greek imagination. Centaurs. Centaurs are perhaps one of the best known figures in Greek mythology. The half-man, half-horse can be seen on vases and metopes of the Parthenon. For hundreds of years, they were visually striking and popular, yet everything about them was odd. From their origins to their bodies, centaurs were a challenge to the imagination. A popular story of the centaur's origins maintained that when Ixion was too attracted to Hera, Zeus sent him a cloud made to look like Hera, with which Ixion had sex. Well, I mean, cloud sex, I feel like I would notice if you were just, a cloud. But I guess things happened back then in the Greek mythology. So, yeah. The result was Centaurus, who then mated with the mares on Mount Pelion and fathered the race of centaurs. Even in the 5th century, there were skeptics who dismissed this tale of cloud sex and bestiality as fanciful. The writer Polyphetus claimed that they were actually horsemen trying to drive off cattle that were destroying crops. But this is rationalizing the centaurs. Add goad, kentron, to bull, tauros, and the result is centaur. In addition to their origins, there is still a great deal about them that is confusing, particularly in relation to the combination of their horsey and human bits. Early representations, like the 2 centaurs on a sarcophagus from Clazomenae, seem to ask, where does the human bit stop and the equine part begin? Their human legs appear to be somewhere between horse and human, especially the front legs, which have human thighs and knees, but end in fetlocks and hooves. In some images, the centaur appears to have an entirely human body, head to foot, with a horse's rear stuck on it. In other cases, the horse body and human torso merge at the waist, hippocentaurs. This is the version we are most familiar with. What both types of centaurs have in common is that they are anomalous. They grab our attention and force us to ask, what is a human? Wild versus civilized. Centaurs are a reminder of the powerful threat of our wilder nature if we lose our inhibitions. Unlike the noble centaurs of recent stories, from Narnia to Harry Potter, Greek centaurs get drunk. Even the smell of wine is enough to send them crazy, and they rape women. One of the best known examples of this took place at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, where their drunken behavior finally erupts in an all-out war between the Lapiths and the Centaurs. Dramatically depicted in the pediment of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, probably the most widely seen centaur scene in Greece. Still, we might ask, if centaurs are symbols of unbridled excess, does that explain their popularity? Well, yes. For the Greeks, centaurs are what zombies and robots are for us, an embodiment of various fears and anxieties in a form close enough to be human to be recognizable. They are an extended meditation on what precisely it means to be human. Since the centaur is always at least in part human, but in part not human, it forces us to ask, what is the human? Take, for example, the cheap and popular small terracotta figurines from Boeotia in the Archaic period. They often have a line of paint right where the human and equine bits merge, stimulating the viewer's imagination. Is it a monster because it is not purely human? Or is it superhuman because it can run faster than a human? Xenophon reports that the Greek Chrysanthus sang the praises of the centaur. Now the creature that I have envied most is, I think, the centaur, if any such being ever existed. Able to reason with a man's intelligence, and to manufacture with his hands what he needed while he possessed the fleetness and strength of a horse, so as to overtake whatever ran before him and to knock down whatever stood in his way. The centaur is both familiar enough and strange enough to draw attention to what we humans can and can't do. Anomaly. As a centaur is an anomaly, centaurs often crop up in situations where the combination of elements that don't go together is jarring and off-putting. Very often these involve desire. For example, Philostratus in the 2nd century describes a painting of female centaurs, Centaurites. When he starts to sing the praises of female centaurs, the description takes on a disturbing undertone. How beautiful the Centaurides are, even when they are horses, for some grow out of white mares, others are attached to chestnut mares, and the coats of others are dappled, but they glisten like those of horses that are well cared for. There is also a white female centaur that grows out of a black mare, and the very opposition of the colors helps to produce the united beauty of the whole. There is an erotic dimension to this fantasy world imagined by Philostratus that is parallel to the conventional world of humans, but blends the unreal and fantastic in ways that are just a little bit off. The mosaic from Roman North Africa depicting a beauty queen crowned by 2 female centaurs suggests Philostratus wasn't the only fellow to be aroused by female centaurs. A second case of strange mashup is the female centaur blended with another mythological, the Gorgon. In the case of an amphora dated to the 7th century BC depicting Medusa slain by Perseus, the monster is a female centaur, making the monster doubly unnatural, a Medusa who is also partially alluring. Marriageable girls were often likened to fillies, and marriage was frequently equated with the bridling of the maiden. So giving Medusa a centaur's body added layers to the symbolism to the scene. In a third case of the centaur prompting some uncomfortable questions about sex and desire, a pair of centaurs on a Palermo red figure amphora are depicted in the poses of older Orestes, lover, and Eromenos, beloved, in a pederastic scene. What happens when you carefully depict centaurs, the wilder one as Orestes, the man centaur as Eromenos, in such a scene? When pederasty is presented as a performance involving fantastic creatures suddenly acting in very human ways, the practice looks bizarre. Are centaurs taught to be good, mainly centaurs by pederastic initiation? Here the centaur doesn't just exist as a fact, it functions to shed light on human behaviors by displacing them into a parallel world. Chiron. If the Palermo amphora offers an irreverent portrayal of pederasty, it raises the question of initiation and the most famous centaur of them all, Chiron. Remember that as a teacher of heroes, Chiron lived, like the other centaurs, on Mount Pelion, a rugged part of north-central Greece. But just as Centaur suggested a wilderness lurking just beneath the surface of the Greek culture, Chiron was their opposite, a refined tutor who trained heroes in the ways of civilization. He taught medicine to Asclepius, and depictions of him teaching Achilles various skills, including playing the lyre, remained popular through antiquity. Despite his appearance, Chiron was the opposite of the wild centaurs. While here shown on vases, he resembles the centaurs in having an equine rear end, but he is usually wearing the clothes of a well-dressed gentleman, such as a chitoniskos tunic, or even the elaborate himation. The garments remind us that, whatever his connections to wild places, he symbolizes wilderness tamed. For this reason, he is often shown carrying hares or deer that he has hunted. Just as boys would go into the wild and learn to hunt, displaying both skill and mastery, so Chiron is a model of wisdom and sobriety, a teacher who is a master of self-control, and therefore a model to young men. The center of Son. While this was imaginative in the archaic and classical periods over hundreds of years, the ubiquity of the centaur resulted in the figure being taken for granted, in the same way that in 2025 we might ask, how do you make a good zombie movie? Haven't we seen it all? The Roman answer was to invent real centaurs. A 2nd century author, Phlegon of Tralles, describes the Roman centaur in this way. Above Son, a city in Arabia, a hippocentaur was discovered high up on a mountain which is full of a marvelous drug. The king captured the hippocentaur alive and sent it with the other gifts to Caesar in Egypt. It lived on meat, but was unable to endure the change of climate and died, so the prefect of Egypt had it preserved and sent to Rome. And first it was displaced in the palace, having a face more savage than a human's, and hairy hands and fingers, and its lungs were connected to its forelegs and stomach. It had the hard hooves of a horse and yellowish hair, even though its skin had been blackened by the preservation process. It was not as big as some writers have recorded, but also not as small. In the aforementioned city of Son, there were also said to be other hippocentaurs. If someone does not believe the one sent to Rome was real, he can investigate it, for the preserved one is kept on the property of the emperor, as I said before. The center of Son was brought to Rome and exhibited in the emperor's cabinet of curiosities. Stripped of its mythical existence, the centaur from Son has been captured and put on display, proof of the reach of Rome. Pliny says that he himself saw another hippocentaur from Egypt which died and was shipped to the emperor preserved in honey. These specimens satisfied a desire to verify myth, like the Vola centaur on display in Tennessee. But unlike early centaurs who suggested a wildness lurking just beneath the surface of Greek culture, the centaur of Son symbolized the wildness at the edge of empire. If order and civilization were to prevail, the centaur had to be tamed. So some interesting stuff about centaurs. We have some pictures too. I'm not sure if you can see them, but look at that. That's a rim of a terracotta painted sarcophagus. Very cool. Oh, getting sleepy. Well, that was some good time, I think. We got a good bit of reading done. I don't read much, so any little bit, I learned is very useful information. Mostly about centaurs, but centaurs, I never thought to compare them to the modern day zombie, but that's pretty interesting. Okay, I think that's it for me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this lo-fi attempt, and maybe in these 19 minutes you're able to fall asleep, and if so, have the sweetest dreams right now. I hope that there's butterflies and sunshine and maybe some, I don't know, Greek centaurs in there. Okay, this is May signing off and wishing you a lovely, lovely night. Good night.